So some of the adoption signals, and that's mostly what they are, we can talk about the use cases later, from one of the big companies. A lot of these is virtue signaling, and some of these are actual adoption. Most people will have heard of Michael Saylor's strategy to adopt Bitcoin as a treasury asset on their balance sheet. Has been super successful. Everybody should actually listen to him and his treasury strategy. There's one really good YouTube video where he explains that in detail. Look for the long form version. So that's a really good use case for Bitcoin specifically. But one thing I want to touch on next is, for 10 years now, we have been getting emails with the battle cry of crypto adoption, blockchain adoption. And obviously, it should be said that this is a vacuous statement. It's adoption by who and for what, right? And so as investors, that's what we're looking for. Why are people adopting it? What are they adopting it for? And who is adopting it, right? And so once you start breaking this down, you realize a lot of different things. So we don't expect cryptocurrency adoption, for example, by your moms, right? So your mom didn't adopt voice over IP either. Your mom adopted Skype, your mom adopted WhatsApp. If you ask your mom if she's using voice over IP, she'll tell you, honey, I have no idea what you're talking about. But the point there being is, people at large adopt application, they don't adopt technology, right? And that's a very important thing to always examine. Don't fall for these half statements like blockchain adoption, cryptocurrency adoption. Always insist on asking who is adopting it, why are they adopting it, what are they adopting it for, and then maybe also how are they adopting it, i.e. what wallet are they using, as one example. So I haven't talked about tokens at all, because a token is nothing more than a standardized smart contract. Let that sink in for a second. It's very similar to what your printed fiat dollar note is. So if you still carry cash, this is a standardized contract. Every piece of Federal Reserve note is a standardized contract, and it's standardized for the amount of $1 or $5 or $100, but it's simply a standardized contract. Every token is a standardized smart contract. And as I mentioned in the beginning, a smart contract is nothing more but self-executing code, or what people sometimes call unstoppable code. That's all it is. It's code. And I put some of the classifications that are being thrown out here. But honestly, I look at every single smart contract as standing on its own merit. We just had another unfortunate discussion in Congress about stablecoins, and then because they invited only one constituencies there, which is again for-profit companies, the definition of stablecoin was such that it only refers to fiat pegs, where the more interesting and important ones are really algorithmic stablecoins, where there's no company behind that. If there's a company behind that, by definition, it has nothing to do with the blockchain space. It has nothing to do with decentralized software solutions. It's unrelated, right? And so that's why those classifications, by and large, are the attempt of putting a label on a beam of light, right? We're talking about software here. We're talking about bytes here. They all stand on their own merit. So now I'm going to switch to a slide that most people never talk about when we talk about, funny enough, crypto. What's crypto? Crypto is cryptography, crypto is security. And the reason why this is important is, this year, the cost of cybercrime will exceed $6 trillion. And I showed you the market cap of cryptocurrencies earlier, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 trillion. The damages from cybercrime this year will exceed $6 trillion. And the core problem of cybercrime is A, human beings, and then B, the technology that they have access to, which is database-driven solutions. You cannot protect databases. It's impossible. Data that's been entered into a database has been copied, and is accessible to a nefarious actor. The most important paradigm of cryptographic primitives, which is my term for anything that includes cryptocurrencies, which don't matter all that much. But the most important aspect is that of data integrity and data security. And so data breaches in the United States, which one happens approximately every hour, and on average cost the company $8.6 million. And the numbers go down here at the end. The reason why they go down is because the average reporting time for this data breaches exceeds 200 days, and sometimes is never reported at all. Now we're getting to what I would consider the most important slide to embrace. So we're going to speak about one fallacy that calls blockchains protocols. Blockchains are not protocols. That's yet one of the other very unuseful metaphors. Blockchains are protocols maybe in kind of this business logic sense, but blockchains make use of protocol. But the use case of blockchains, like I mentioned earlier, is very, very narrowly defined. The single use case for blockchains is to hand over controls from A to B. If there's a ledger, that's an optional component, and it will cause additional hazards that need to be mitigated against. By default, it doesn't have to exist, at least not in a publicly readable form. And that's why if you went down the rabbit hole a little bit deeper and you saw the latest implementation and improvements to the Bitcoin Lightning Network, Taproot specifically, it solves for that particular issue, because what I call the herd immunity of all blockchains currently has been breached, i.e., if and when and where you commit things you shouldn't be committing to store in a blockchain, which again, blockchain should never be used to store data. That's not the point of a blockchain. Anybody still explaining blockchain as a storage mechanism and likening it to a database is simply dead wrong. It's the opposite of a database. But more importantly, so all these other cryptographic primitives, I touched on some of them earlier, that we need for the actual decentralization of the internet, of the World Wide Web to happen, as being developed right now. Most of these companies that you're seeing on here, by the way, are part of our current portfolio. We just sold one of the companies on here, Keyless. But a lot of these companies we have invested in very, very early on, because they are building the primitives that are needed. But then also what you might notice if you saw previous communication around the topic of blockchains and quote unquote protocols, there's this consistent claim that there's like this Fed protocol thesis that value will accrue to the network. That's the exception to the rule. That might be true for Ethereum's Ether, but is not true for most other blockchain-derived assets. Because ultimately, if you think about it, did the value of TCP/IP get accrued to the TCP/IP stack, or did value accrue to the SMTP protocol or to the voice over IP protocol? No, the value accrued to things like Skype, the value accrued to things like Gmail, the value accrued to the application. Most of the value will continue to accrue to the application. We are just at this current stage mostly catering to the needs of developers. And that's why there's a lot of confusion in the space.